The old gods, creatures and beings of incomprehensible power that thrive off of chaos, anarchy, and destruction, once ruled in a dark and tyrannic reign over the infant universe. However, thanks to the heroic acts of the Titanic Pantheon, the Old Ones were either killed or imprisoned within the primordial world of Azeroth. Despite this, however, their corruption and whispers are still very much present within the world, and it is for this very reason that we should never forget that the Old Ones will always return sooner or later. In today's video, we will be talking about 10 facts about the Old Gods. Number 10. All of the Old Gods that have been named and that we know in World of Warcraft are currently named and referenced after an outer god or great old one in the H.P. Lovecraft mythos. Cthulhu is named after Cthulhu, an entity that looks like a mix between a giant human, an octopus, and a dragon, and a being that is depicted as being over hundreds of meters tall. Yogg-Saron is referenced to Yog-Sothoth, who knows all and sees all. He is coterminous with all of time and space, yet is apparently locked outside of the universe that we all inhabit. Y'Shaarj is referenced to Shub-Niggurath, also known as the Black Goat of the Woods with 1,000 young. And N'Zoth, however, is not clearly stated to be referenced to any. Some say he is named after Ny'alotha, otherwise known as the Haunter of the Red Abyss or the Thing That Should Not Be, which wouldn't be surprising since the name Ny'alotha is similar to the name Ny'alotha, a dark city of eternal sleep which could also be directed to the Emerald Dream and ultimately N'Zoth. Number 9. There are many theories on how the Silithid actually came to be as they are on Azeroth. Some theories state that the Silithid are alien to the planet, having arrived from a different planet within the twisting nether like the orcs. And others state that the Silithid are insectoid creatures that serve the Karaji. However, there is another theory that is more likely to be true since it seems to be the one that makes the most sense and the one that is more commonly heard of compared to the others. This tale of the Silithid's origins goes as the following. The true heart of the world's magic, the Well of Eternity, contained incredible magical ethers that created the Silithid. Upon the creation of these insectoid creatures, Cthulhu attempted to sunder the world under its merciless grasp by creating avatars from the insectoid race and molding them into its image. These avatars of the Silithid were to be known as the Karaji, the insectoid creatures that can be found within the Temple of Ankh-Kiraj. Number 8. Back when the Old Gods first had complete dominion over Azeroth, they created the Black Empire, which was one of the first ever primordial civilizations in the world. This empire was lorded over by the Old Ones and kept in line by their lieutenants, the Elemental Lords being Therazane, Akir, Neptulon, and Ragnaros. Making up the bulk of this empire were the Faceless Ones, the Akir, an insectoid race that later split into the Karaji, Nerubians, and Mantid, and numerous of other unnamed minions. This empire, however, was inevitably shattered when the Titans waged war upon the entire Black Empire and their masters. Although the Old Gods and the Elemental Lords were powerful beyond mortal comprehension, their dark forces were unable to stop the Titans. However, it is stated that as a result of this battle, a Titan and an Old God fell, the Titan being unnamed and the Old God being Y'Shaarj. With the war meeting its end, the Pantheon shattered the Old God citadels and imprisoned the surviving Old Gods far beneath the surface of the world. Number 7. The Old Gods are fiendish beings who thrive and feed purely off of chaos and anarchy. They are also incredibly strong and powerful, as it has been stated that it would take numerous of Titans or Titanic soldiers just to subdue or defeat a single Old God or Old God minion. For example, it took the combined might of 20 stone giants just to defeat Sogoth the Slitherer, a soldier of the Old Ones. Many believe that the reason why the Old Gods ultimately lost the war against the Titans was due to the fact that their sadistic nature made it extremely difficult for them to work alongside one another. A prime example of this would be when N'Zoth directed his subjects under the command of Warlord Zanaz to wage an endless war against the forces of both Cthulhu and Yogg-Saron. Unfortunately, however, there's still little to no information regarding this war between the three Old Gods. No stated duration, no recorded casualties, not really anything. I'm assuming, however, that since it states that N'Zoth waged war against both the forces of Cthulhu and Yogg-Saron, instead of waging a free-for-all against them, that it might have been possible for Cthulhu and Yogg-Saron to have not necessarily worked together, but rather sort of ignore each other and focus directly on N'Zoth, since it does seem to imply that N'Zoth did in fact initiate the war. Number 6. In World of Warcraft Legion, Shadow Priests will receive a legendary artifact dagger named Zal-Atath, Blade of the Black Empire. The dagger itself has been around for ages as it was forged from a claw of an old god eons ago. The dagger was also used by Dark Priests in sacrificial rituals during the height and the darkest ages of the Black Empire. After the fall of the Empire, Zal-Atath was stored and hidden away by the Dark Priests and their cults, but it has surfaced from time to time over the course of history where it still continues to be used as a sacrificial weapon or where it is associated with some other kind of horrific ritual. The blade, similar to other legendary weapons in the history of Warcraft, also has a will of its own. It uses powerful void tethers and energies to warp everything around it for a nefarious purpose. Number 5. Yogg-Saron made his presence well known when the heroes of both the Horde and the Alliance ventured into Northrend in an effort to quell the threat of the Lich King and his Scourge armadas. Yogg-Saron is known not only for corrupting the Titanic Watchers that were all tasked to keep a constant vigil over Ulduar, but for also creating the Curse of Flesh, which plagued many of the Titans' creations, including the Mechanomes, the Dwarves, the Earthen, the Vrykul, certain Earth Elementals, the Mogu, and also the Tol'vir. However, even though the Curse of Flesh seems like a given, and pretty straightforward as in they simply transform into a fleshy version of their former selves, this was not always the case. For the Mechanomes, this is exactly what happened, but for the Earthen, this was not the destined fate for all of them to have. The Curse of Flesh caused the Earthen to mutate into a devolved, primitive, and highly hostile species known as the Trogs, while the Series 2 Earthen, which were a modification of the original prototype created by the Titans, mutated into a fleshy version of their original form, rather than being mutated into the Trogs. The Vrykul too also originally had a stony metallic skin. However, in the quests Echo of Yimiron and Anguish of Niflvar, it was discovered that the birthing of humans was originally a severe side effect of the Curse of Flesh on the Vrykul, which in turn makes humans direct descendants of the Vrykul. The Mogu also were originally stone guardians of the dark heart of Y'Shaarj, but sometime before the first age of the Mogu Empire, their bodies began to transform into flesh, which threw the race into decades of chaotic, clan-based warfare and anarchy. It is also unknown how severe the Curse of Flesh impacts the individual who bears it. The severity of the curse may also be impacted by the size of the individual. Dwarves, gnomes, and Vrykul obviously have many fleshy variants that are present in Azeroth, but stone giants such as Archivon seem to have suffered less of an impact from the Curse of Flesh than the other, smaller races. A note from Archivon's log on the 1,051,213th day states that Archivon woke up to notice that his face was feeling soft. However, he didn't give two shits and fell back asleep. Number 4. Killing one old god will result in the scarring of the land, and killing numerous of old gods can potentially make a planet completely uninhabitable. In Mists of Pandaria, we discovered that Y'Shaarj was the old god that was killed in the war between the Old Ones and the Titans, and as a result, the lands were permanently scarred and the Shah had arisen due to the fall of the Old One. Kil'Ruk, the Wind Reaver, also tells the story of Y'Shaarj, how it was like in the presence of the being.
Our gods were many and powerful. We men did worship the 7 heads of Y'Shaarj. Great was the Old One, and terrible was his wrath. He consumed hope and begat despair. He inhaled courage and breathed fear. When the usurpers came, the ones you call Titans, Y'Shaarj was destroyed. His last terrible breath has haunted this land ever since, but the shadows he left behind are mere whispers of his former glory. I tell you now because you have earned this warning. Your gods are not our gods, outsider. If the Old Ones ever return, we Mantid will once again stand by their side. The wisest among you will do the same.
It is because of Y'Shaarj's death that it is strongly hinted that the 7 Shahs in World of Warcraft are actually manifestations of the Old One's 7 heads. In the puzzle box of Yogg-Saron, a whisper can also be ushered from within the box, asking a player the following: have you had the dream again? A black goat with 7 eyes that watches from the outside. which may refer to Y'Shaarj due to the similar theme of 7 eyes or 7 heads, and also due to the fact that he is named after Shub-Niggurath, who is also known as the Black Goat of the Woods with 1,000 young in the mythos. But there is something wrong about this. Shouldn't it be 14 eyes, 2 eyes for each head? Not really. Old gods and their minions, if you haven't noticed already, are extremely disgusting beings. Their appearances basically reflect what they feed on: fear. Some Sha appear to have 2 eyes, others have 4 or 5. It is because of this, which is why the numbers probably don't add up, because they all don't necessarily have 2 eyes, and I think saying 7 eyes has a closer correlation with 7 heads than saying 23.5 eyes if you want to go ahead and take it literally. Number 3. The War of the Ancients conflict that we know today in-game is actually a rewritten version of the original battle. The War of the Ancients event that most know today is the reason why Broxigar the Red is so popular, because he is the only known orc to have ever stepped foot into the realm of the Legion and personally wound Sargeras. However, in the original War of the Ancients, Broxigar was never there. Instead, what happened was that the old gods were attempting to warp time and space in order to escape their prisons, and because of this, it resulted in temporal anomalies appearing, which piqued the curiosity of individuals whom were aware of it. When the Horde shamans detected this anomaly, they sent Brox and a younger warrior named Gascal to investigate, which resulted in Broxigar being sent 10,000 years into the past, while Gascal was unfortunately killed. Luckily, however, the events of the War of the Ancients did not drastically change when Broxigar was sent back in time, since it was not an alternate timeline, but rather the same exact event, which was being rewritten. An example of this would be Akir the Houndmaster. In the original timeline, Akir survived the War of the Ancients and was actually killed during the Third War. But in the rewritten timeline, Malfurion kills Akir, which means he doesn't make an appearance at all in the Third War because history was not simply being relived, it was literally being rewritten. Number 2. The Akir were an insectoid race and originally one whole empire. Their entire race was made up of the Mantid who served Y'Shaarj, the Nerubians who served Yogg-Saron, and the Karaji who served Cthulhu. However, their kingdom was split in half due to a conflict 16,000 years ago known as the war between the Akir and the Trolls. In this war, the Akir Empire, due to their incredibly evil and imperialistic nature, waged war against the Trolls in an effort to wipe out all non-insectoid life from the lands of Kalimdor. However, the Amani and Gurubashi empires managed to stand their ground against the Akir for thousands of years. Yes, this war lasted for thousands of years. And although the Trolls were unable to win a true victory over the Akir, in the long run, they managed to split the Insectoid kingdom in half due to their hardened persistence and strength of willpower, which inevitably allowed them to keep on fighting against the Akir's endless numbers. This caused the citizens of the Insect Empire to flee into 2 separate colonies, one in the frozen north and another in the barren south. The ones who traveled north were known as the Nerubians, and the ones who fled south were the Karaji. Number 1. Although the war between the Akir Empire and the Troll Empires lasted for thousands of years without a true winning side, the War of the Shifting Sands was a much shorter war, with clearly a superior side in the early days of the conflict. The war initially began 1,000 years ago before the First War, when the Night Elves, who at the time were led by Fandral Staghelm, battled the Karaji outside of the Temple of Ankh-Kiraj when they suddenly began pouring out of the fortress, seeking dominance over the lands of Kalimdor unexpectedly. Whereas the Trolls were able to stand their ground against the Karaji for thousands of years, the Night Elves were facing devastating losses and a fractured army in nearly a few months. Eventually, after losing so many warriors, including his own beloved son, Fandral and his army were forced to retreat back to Taenerys and surrender Silithus to the Karaji. Suddenly incredibly desperate for allies to aid in the conflict, Fandral sought out Anachronos and asked him for the Bronze Dragonflight's support. The dragon, however, refused to join the fray until the Karaji attacked the Caverns of Time itself, which caused Anachronos to realize how dire the situation was, and he eventually agreed to join Staghelm. However, despite the aid of the Bronze Dragonflight, the endless waves of the Karaji continued to swallow the dragon and Night Elf resistance. This resulted in the green, blue, and red dragonflights to also join the war in an effort to quell the insect tide. But even with the combined might of the 4 dragonflights supporting the Night Elves, the insects were still managing to hold their ground. It then became clear to the forces of the resistance that no amount of force would ever be enough to end this war. To make matters worse, whispers also began to emerge as well that the dragons that had flown over the temple of Ankiraj had felt a terrible and ancient presence within the city. An incredible evil presence that was able to mask itself. Something so powerful that it could control the Silithid and perhaps even the Karaji. Because of this new discovery, the dragons and the Night Elves knew that they had to react quickly or else Azeroth may once again suffer another epic catastrophe. After careful deliberation, it was then decided that the best course of action would be to stop the insectoid army at the source by erecting a magical barrier which would contain the hordes of Karaji inside until a more hopeful stratagem could be devised. And so, with the entire resistance in agreement, the heroes of Azeroth made one last and final push to the city's gates, where they managed to erect a magical barrier that would transform their enemy's very fortress into a prison. A prison that would jail not only the innumerable legions of the Silithid and the Karaji, but a prison that would also house Cthulhu himself. That is until 1,000 years later, when the Old One awoke from his slumber, and the events of the Second War of the Shifting Sands unfolded, and the gates of Ankiraj were opened.